Welcome back, everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about accessibility in game UX design. I'm going to be talking about a couple of games on my Nintendo Switch and also on my phone. I'm more of a casual gamer myself, so I'm just going to be covering a few that I've played in the past year. In gaming, accessibility is really about leveling the playing fields for everyone so that all types of players can enjoy a game. These can include things like remapping the controls on your controller to better suit your mobility needs, resizing subtitles for the visually impaired, removing distracting background elements, or really just about anything that you can modify from the straight out of the box version to make the game a lot more enjoyable. Now, accessibility is a very, very complex topic, and this is only going to barely scratch the surface, but I hope that it piques your curiosity enough to do some further reading. I'm going to include some resources at the end of this video, and also I hope, it helps you think about how to design for things outside of gaming for the general public as well. Today I'm going to be covering 3 games: Overcooked, Among Us, and Animal Crossing. So let's take a look. One of my favorite co-op games is Overcooked. As the name suggests, it's a cooking game, and maybe you've heard of it, but it definitely has the ability to put a lot of relationships in jeopardy when you're screaming orders at each other, getting frustrated, and trying to sabotage your friends at the same time. Team 17, the developer behind Overcooked, has been making extra efforts to improve their accessibility options with the release of each new version of the game, which I appreciate. And they also have other co-op games like Moving Out, which is equally frustrating and involves moving furniture, which, in real life is already pretty frustrating. But they also have things like being able to remap your controller settings or having easier assist modes where, the furniture that you move is a bit lighter so that you can move it around faster. But today we're talking about Overcooked, so let's take a look at what sort of accessibility options there are in the game. Overcooked gives you the option to select a dyslexia-friendly font, which is an option that I don't see in a lot of games. It looks like it's actually a little thinner and more bottom heavy. You can also choose different text sizes, but I haven't actually noticed a huge difference. In the game, the font sizes are still a little too small, I felt. You can also choose a character that's in a wheelchair, which I thought was just a nice touch because it shows that they do also care about inclusivity and character design. Some gamers want more of a challenge, but others want to take it at a more leisurely pace, and I've noticed that a lot of games like Overcooked now have something that's like an easy or assist mode where within this game at least you can extend the timer, or you can even set it so that your orders never expire and you don't have to, rush the game as much. You can also see here that different players are indicated by different shapes and different colored shapes so that they are easily identifiable. That being said, some stages have really fine details, so it's hard to make out what your ingredients are. It's hard enough for us to see it on a big TV screen, and sometimes I have to move up really close, but on a Switch it's even more difficult. You also can't remap your controls, so if you're a one-handed player, it's going to be a little tougher. They do a pretty good job with the tutorials in the beginning though, and I like how the indicators for where you're supposed to go and what buttons you're supposed to press is very clearly marked. But I think that the text probably scrolls by a little too quickly for you to be able to catch what all the instructions are. Since we haven't been able to hold indoor gatherings with friends in the past year, we've sometimes had to just gather virtually and play games that way. So among them is Among Us. And you've probably heard of this game. It's been memed the heck out of in every social media platform. And honestly, I don't think that the developers anticipated that it would become this popular, because otherwise I think they probably would have paid a bit more attention into designing the game to suit a diversity of players. It was definitely not colorblind friendly in the earlier versions. So we're gonna take a look at it today and see if they've made any improvements since. The character design is pretty much all the same, except you can change the color and also your headgear. You also have an indicator on top of your character that tells you what their name is, but I found that most people still refer to each other by their colors. I like how the game gives you the option to choose between touching all over your screen to navigate around or using a joystick, which is pretty much tethered to one side of your screen. I wish there was an option for you to move it to either the left side or the right side, depending on, whether you're left-handed or right-handed. The game moves pretty quickly, so I'm glad that they have an option in the setting menu where you can turn off visual tasks so that those who are hard of seeing can have an easier time playing the game. One of the most notorious visual tasks in the beginning of the game was having to match some wires by color, which obviously put colorblind players at a severe disadvantage, and they've had to add in some patterns later on to differentiate between them. A mobile-friendly feature that's in the game is the option for you to message other players with canned responses so that you don't have to type everything out every single time, especially because some of the interactions in the game are going to be quite similar. You're basically accusing someone and, identifying where they were, what they were doing. So a lot of the responses are going to be recycled pretty often anyway. As we all know, typing on a phone is pretty annoying, so anytime you can make life easier for the user with either pre-populated text fields or just having commonly used responses is going to be quite helpful. Despite the accessibility improvements made to the game, you're going to still find that in many public rooms, the other players do identify one another based on their color, so if you are hard of seeing, it's probably still going to be tough to play. And if you do want to play a colorblind version of the game in which you and your friends within a private room play together using quite similar colors, you can do so, and it'll just be a higher level of difficulty. So the next game I'm going to be talking about is Animal Crossing. It saved me and my friend's sanity during the beginning of the pandemic. It gave us a really nice reprieve with all the craziness that was going on in the world. It really is, marketed to a very wide demographic. I've seen people of all ages play, but even so, it's really missing accessibility options in many key areas. For all the customization that Animal Crossing has, whether it's changing your outfit or decorating your home, surprisingly it lacks the most basic functionality, which is to have a settings menu. There's also a lot of memorization required for controls, things like how to open up your backpack, switch the item you're holding, or accidentally whacking your villager with a net when you meant to approach them and talk to them. Since there isn't a settings menu, you can't set your controls, and if it's been a while since you played the game, you'll have to relearn them. I think compared to Microsoft and Sony, Nintendo is actually pretty slow to add some of these accessibility features system-wide. One of the things I love most about Animal Crossing is its beautiful sound design, and this is super important for visually impaired players. I really like how you can hear when you're walking on different surfaces, whether it's a pavement, sand, or grass, so you can identify where you are on your island. There's also balloon sounds, so you know when something's hovering nearby and you can shoot it down. There's also a fishing bite sound, so when you go fishing and you're not too sure if it has latched on, there's kind of like a biting sound that it makes. And I actually rely on this a lot because I feel like my reflexes are also faster, just being able to interpret the sound before I actually see the fish latch onto the ball. Your controller does rumble differently depending on what type of fish you catch. Most of the time it's kind of deceiving though. I would think that I caught some rare fish and then it turns out to be another lame sea bass, but every once in a while I do get lucky. Fishing is still one of those things that requires a lot of visual concentration though. So for example, if you're trying to catch a shark, it's kind of tough to see if there's a fin for some people. And also distinguishing between the different sizes of fish is tough. Some characters also have the same voice if they have the same personality associated with a character in the game, so it might be tough to tell them apart as well. I'm not too sure if there are any third-party screen readers that can help players who can't read subtitles read it out loud to them, but it definitely doesn't come with the game, and the fact that all these animals are kind of speaking gibberish doesn't help. Like I said, this is just a very brief glimpse into the world of accessibility when it comes to gaming design. If you want to learn more about it, I recommend a website called Dagger System, and I'm going to include a link in the description below. But they review a lot of popular games and rate them in terms of how well they do with, auditory, fine motor, or visual accessibility. For game makers or anyone else who's just interested in learning more, I also recommend gameaccessibilityguidelines.com. Think of it as kind of like the gaming WCAG guidelines, where they have a list of suggested accessibility features that you might want to consider when designing a game. For anyone who's not super familiar with what WCAG guidelines are, if you are building an app or a website, it could have tips like, add alt text to your images so that it can be picked up by a screen reader, and, make sure your color contrast ratios are enough so that your iconography or your text pops out enough against the background. And also things like remember to add subtitles to your videos. My company does an accessibility audit every year, and there are 3 levels. So there's A, AA, and AAA with WCAG. And basically the higher up you go, the higher the standards are, the more difficult it is to implement. But it also means that you are covering your bases and are able to reach a wider audience that way. Of course, not every company has the resources to reach that AAA level, but there are a lot of resources out there now that are free that you can use, and I can cover that in a future video that basically helps you get a little closer to that standard. But I would say that the most important thing is really just to make an effort to make your product more accessible, because I've worked at companies where they've poured many resources into creating an entire team around accessibility with an accessibility lab. And then, there's also other companies that probably have the same resources, but basically decide to drop the ball and not put any effort into it. There's also a YouTube channel called Game Makers Toolkit, who I'm also going to link in the description below, and they put out a video annually that covers accessibility features from the most popular games of the past year, so I would definitely recommend checking them out as well. Let me know in the comments below if you or someone you know has been impacted by a game's accessibility features and what they were. And also, is there a particular game that you really enjoy, but someone else is struggling with it because it's lacking some accessibility features? And what are those? Until next time, bye.